If you've ever tried to explain the Halloween franchise to someone who's never seen it, you know the pain. Michael Myers has been stabbed, shot, burned, blown up more times than anybody can count, and somehow he just keeps coming back. What most casual fans don't realize is that there isn't just one Halloween story. There are 4 separate timelines, each branching off from the original 1978 film and ignoring the others entirely. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down all 4 of the Halloween timelines, how they diverge, how they're the same, and which of these actually work. Let's start from the very beginning. It all starts in Haddonfield, Illinois, 1963. 6-year-old Michael Myers murders his sister Judith on Halloween. Michael's institutionalized and his psychiatrist, Dr. Loomis, is convinced that this boy is essentially the pure embodiment of evil. 15 years later, Michael returns home to Haddonfield, Illinois, going on a rampage and fixating most of his attention on one teen, Laurie Strode. Laurie survives the night as Dr. Loomis shoots Michael 6 times, he falls off a balcony, and the film ends, and Michael has somehow managed to escape again. Halloween 2 picks up just a few minutes later, where Laurie is rushed to the hospital, and you guessed it, Michael follows her straight to the hospital. We get the crazy reveal that Michael and Laurie are actually siblings. After everything that happened in 1963 with Michael and his family, we find out that Laurie was put up for adoption and never told about any of the events that happened. The film ends with Michael seemingly killed in a hospital explosion, and Laurie, understandably, is just never the same again. The story then goes to Halloween 4. Yes, Halloween 3 exists, but that has nothing to do with Michael Myers. Great movie though. 6 years later, we learn Michael survived the explosion and has been in comatose ever since. Laurie, meanwhile, has died sometime before the film. And in her place, we meet her young daughter, Jamie Lloyd, who's now living with a foster family in Haddonfield. Michael wakes up from his coma and comes back to finish what he started with the family. The film really builds to this wild ending with Jamie having been terrorized all night, pushed to her breaking point, stabbing her foster mother while wearing an evil clown costume that eerily looks a lot like Michael Myers did in the original film. It's implied that this evil might be passed down through the bloodline, Jamie snapping and sort of becoming the next shape or killer herself. Most of Halloween 5 takes place a year later. Jamie is now mute and traumatized and lives in the Haddonfield Children's Clinic. Rather than turning evil like Part 4 teased, the film never really commits to the darker direction that it hinted at. Instead, it's kind of a standard slasher movie where nothing too crazy happens. The only interesting thing we see is that Michael and Jamie have some type of psychic connection. Michael cries in the movie, and it's just probably one of the biggest duds in the franchise. The real significance of Halloween 5, though, is not the main plot of the movie, it's more so how it ends. A mysterious man in black shows up at the police station, breaking Michael out of custody, and disappears into the night. No explanation, just a strange cultish presence hinting that something bigger is going on behind the scenes. Well, then we get into Halloween 6, which is one of the more divisive parts of the Halloween franchise. It reveals the idea of the Cult of Thorn. It's an ancient cult that's been controlling Michael for years, using a symbol called the Thorn Rune to essentially curse him into a killing force. Michael, it turns out, isn't just evil in the abstract, but he's a vessel for this curse, and the cult's been manipulating his entire bloodline, including Jamie and the new baby that becomes the next target. It is a very ambitious swing, and you can tell that the filmmakers here were trying to give us a better idea or understanding of Michael's violence and evil and the mythology behind all of it. But some people love that this gives lore and stakes to the film, and others feel like it's over-explaining too much and demystifying the shape makes it far less interesting and not as scary. I'd say I'm a little more in that party, but there are a lot of things that I do love about this film. The Cult of Thorn is creative, but it trades that mystique for mythology, and a lot of longtime fans feel this series was better off without it. So that's Timeline 1, all the way from the original in '78 up to the Cult of Thorn in 1995. Next, we're going to jump into Timeline 2, where the franchise hits the reset button and gives us a very different version of Laurie Strode. This timeline throws out everything about Jamie Lloyd in the films from 4, 5, and 6, and sort of just picks up from where Laurie Strode left off, except 20 years later. Rather than shifting focus to a new protagonist, Halloween H20 keeps Laurie Strode front and center, and this is where Jamie Lee Curtis genuinely delivers one of her best performances out of any film she's ever been in, and most definitely in the Halloween franchise. So after everything that happened in '78, Laurie has faked her death and changed her identity to Carrie Tate, and has spent the last 2 decades running away from what happened to her. She's now the headmistress of a private school in California, raising her teenage son John, who has no idea who his mother really is or what she has survived. The film leans very heavily into trauma. Laurie is drinking heavily, she's very controlling of her son, and it's very clear that she hasn't processed everything that happened that night in 1978. It's worth noting too that the struggle with alcoholism wasn't just written for the character, but Jamie Lee Curtis has been very open about her own real-life struggles with addiction, and you can feel a lot of that raw emotion bleeding into the character of this film, and that's one of the big standouts for me here. Of course, Michael eventually tracks her down, and the final confrontation is one of the most satisfying in the series. Laurie stops running and finally goes on the offense and decapitates Michael herself. For 20 years, this was framed as the definitive ending of Michael Myers. That is until Halloween Resurrection came out. Resurrection takes a sharp right turn and is an absolute mess of a movie. You know how Laurie decapitated Michael? Well, just kidding, she didn't. That was actually a paramedic with Michael's mask on. So Michael is still out there. Laurie's been institutionalized, and Michael shows up to the mental hospital, and within the first few minutes of the film, Laurie is killed. From there, the movie has almost nothing to do with Laurie Strode at all. The plot shifts to a group of college kids wired up with cameras for a live internet webcast, spending the night in Michael's childhood home to hunt for the truth behind his killings. Michael predictably shows up to the house and starts picking them off one by one on this webcast or live stream, whatever you'll call it. This was a shameless attempt to cash in on the early 2000s found footage and reality TV craze, and Busta Rhymes is even the show's producer, at one point literally fighting Michael martial arts style. This is widely considered the weakest entry in the entire franchise, and I fully stand behind that. H20 is great, but this timeline really suffers because of Resurrection. By the mid-2000s, this franchise had had 8 films, 2 different franchises, and Dimension Films and the Weinstein brothers wanted a complete reset. Their pick to lead the film was Rob Zombie, the musician turned filmmaker behind House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. On paper, this sounded good to Rob Zombie, but in practice, working with the Weinsteins was absolutely brutal. Zombie has talked openly in interviews about Bob Weinstein screaming at him throughout production, being pushed to bring in a new editor that he didn't want, getting a phone call the morning the film opened after it had set a Labor Day record, and being told by Bob Weinstein that it was a disaster. By Zombie's account, this was one of the worst filmmaking experiences in his entire career. The film itself leans very heavily into the 1978 storyline, but taps a little bit deeper into the psychology of Michael. Instead of just giving us the shape as pure evil, Zombie spends a big chunk of the runtime showing us what actually pushes young Michael over the edge. By the time we get into the Laurie Strode side of the movie, we've already spent half of our runtime learning about Michael and seeing his troubled childhood. I know that Rob Zombie is a very divisive name in horror circles, but personally I'm a big fan of his. Do I think the film would have hit harder if he had leaned a little less into the psychology of Michael? Yes, absolutely. Part of what makes him terrifying is that there isn't a clean explanation. But even with that, this movie still works for me. It's unmistakably a Rob Zombie film. It's aggressive, grimy, in your face in a way that the franchise had never done before. And the performances across the board are genuinely great. Malcolm McDowell brings something totally different to Dr. Loomis, Danielle Harris is back, and Scout Taylor Compton makes an incredible Laurie Strode. After how brutal the first film was to make, Zombie did not even want to come back to make a sequel, but to get out of a contract with the Weinsteins, he agreed to make one more film to get out of a 3-picture contract deal. A lot of critics felt that the 2007 film stuck too close to the original story beats, and Zombie clearly took that criticism to heart because Halloween 2 goes in a much stranger and more personal direction. The most striking addition is a visual of a white horse and a ghostly vision of Michael's mother who haunts him and Laurie throughout the film. It's a surreal, almost art house touch that's unlike anything else in the franchise. The film also spends real time on trauma and survival. Laurie is deep in PTSD, unraveling and self-destructive after the events of the first film, and Annie, who survived her attack, is now visibly scarred and struggling to rebuild any normal sense of life. It's genuinely one of the more emotionally raw sequels in the series, even if it's messier and more polarizing than the first film. Now jumping into the most recent timeline, the David Gordon Green Blumhouse trilogy. By 2018, the franchise had obviously been rebooted, retconned, and split into several timelines, and there was a real appetite to go back to basics. John Carpenter was back on board as an executive producer and composer, and the pitch was honestly pretty simple. What if none of these sequels happened and we just picked up decades later with the real emotional fallout of that one night? So, Halloween 2018 resumes 40 years after the events of the original 1978 film. Not Halloween 2. Michael and Laurie are not siblings anymore. Michael's been locked in an institution for 4 decades, and on the night that he's set to be transferred, he escapes. Similar to H20, this film leans very heavily into trauma and life after surviving an event as crazy as this. Laurie spent 40 years preparing for this exact night, fortifying her house, training with weapons, and becoming so consumed by fear that it's fractured her relationship with her daughter Karen. Her granddaughter Allison is caught in the middle, trying to understand a grandmother the rest of the family has written off as paranoid or crazy. So when Michael comes home, it takes 3 generations of Strodes to fight him off as they trap him in Laurie's booby-trapped house and set it on fire. Halloween Kills picks up seconds after 2018 ends, and guess what? Michael survived that fire, and he's out on the town again. The film shifts its focus onto the town of Haddonfield itself, specifically a mob of survivors and residents who band together under the rallying cry, "Evil dies tonight." Determined to hunt Michael down themselves, it's a much bigger, messier, more chaotic film than 2018, and ends about as badly as you'd expect for a mob with pitchforks going up against Michael Myers. To close out the trilogy, Green decided to move the story forward by 4 years to not pick up on the night where we last left off. Michael's vanished and Haddonfield has moved on, but the film uses that time jump to explore the idea of the shape as something bigger than just Michael himself. Enter Corey Cunningham, a young man ostracized by the entire town after an accidental death he was blamed for. Over the course of the film, Corey becomes drawn into Michael's orbit and slowly starts to absorb the same evil, essentially becoming infected by it, which I think is an incredible, brilliant idea. It really blurs the lines between Michael as a person and Michael is kind of this contagious idea. I really like this suggestion that evil isn't just this guy in a mask, but it's more of a energy or thing that can be passed on to someone who's broken enough to let it in. The trilogy ends with Laurie finally killing Michael for good, as her and the town literally shred his body so he can never come back. The ending itself is very meaningful and powerful, and Laurie, after a 44-year run as this amazing final girl, gets the closure and ending that she deserves and needs. So that's every timeline from start to finish. The original run that built the mythology and leaned a little too hard into the Cult of Thorn, the Laurie Strode continuity that gave us one of the best performances of the franchise, and then one of the worst movies, Rob Zombie's grimy psychological reimagining, and the David Gordon Green trilogy that tried to close the whole story out for good. 4 timelines, 1 mask, and honestly, no real consensus on which is the favorite of all fans. So I want to know, which timeline is your favorite? Be sure to drop it in the comments. Thank you so much for being here and watching, and I will see you in the next video.